It was a gray winter morning, the kind where the sky itself seemed to press down heavily on the city, casting a dull, oppressive mood over everything below. The streets, usually busy with the rhythmic hustle of the city's inhabitants, were quiet. The few souls who dared to step out that morning moved briskly, as if eager to escape the cold that gnawed at their bones. At a bus stop, among the metal benches where people often waited for their ride, there was a small, fragile creature standing apart from the others, a cat. Once pristine white, its fur was now streaked with dirt and tangled, matted by the elements. It hunched down in the corner, a fragile silhouette against the harsh backdrop of the winter day. Its eyes, once bright and curious, now stared blankly at the passing cars, glazed with a sadness that no animal should bear. This cat had been abandoned, left to face the cold and loneliness alone. There were no comforting hands to stroke its fur, no kind voice to soothe its fears, nor any warmth to protect it from the brutal chill. The snow, soft at first, began to fall more steadily, covering everything with a fresh layer of white. For the cat, this was just another obstacle to overcome, another layer of cold that clung to its bones. Its once vibrant eyes, full of youthful curiosity, had dulled over time, reflecting the hardship of a life lived in solitude. The question lingered in the air. Why had it been left here? Forgotten by everyone? Why was it stranded at the mercy of the elements, with no one to offer protection or care? The bus stop, typically a temporary stopover for city-goers, had become the cat's only refuge. Each time a bus approached, the cat's ears perked up slightly, its tired gaze lifting with a flicker of hope. It was as though, for just a moment, it believed someone might see it, might finally offer a chance at escape from this forgotten corner. But every bus that arrived carried only people who hurried by, too absorbed in their own lives to notice the small, invisible figure waiting for help. It was as if the cat existed in another world, a shadow that slipped unnoticed through the cracks of the city. As the day wore on, the clouds thickened, and the wind, bitter and sharp, cut through the cat's fragile body. The small shelter at the bus stop, designed to provide some reprieve from the elements, offered little comfort. Cold air seeped through every crack, reminding the cat that it was alone in the world. It curled tighter into the corner, seeking warmth in the memories it could no longer fully grasp. If there had ever been better times, they felt like distant echoes, fading into the fog of the present. The only sounds that accompanied it were the howling wind and the occasional roar of a passing bus, both indifferent to the small creature's plight. Not far from this scene, in a modest apartment, a young woman named Laura was experiencing a day that felt heavier than usual. Laura had always been known for her kind nature, a woman with a heart that easily connected with others, especially animals. She had grown up surrounded by pets, each of them a loyal companion through her childhood, and she'd always felt a bond with creatures in need. Yet adulthood had drawn her away from this part of herself. The grind of daily responsibilities and the pressures of life had slowly distanced her from the deep connection she once shared with animals. That morning, Laura woke up with a sense of unease, a restlessness she couldn't shake. There was something pulling at her, a subtle, insistent feeling that something was missing in her life. It was as if a silent call was reaching out to her from somewhere far off. Though she couldn't quite identify its source, she tried to ignore it as she went about her usual morning routine. But it only grew stronger with each passing minute. Perhaps, she thought, she should take a different route to work today, break from her normal routine. But she couldn't explain why. She just felt drawn to do something. Anything that might lead her somewhere new. Meanwhile, the cat, nameless and directionless, remained where it had been all day. Its eyes, though dull from fatigue, still held a faint flicker of hope, fragile, but there, a hope that somehow, someone would come. Laura had no idea that the path she was about to take was linked to this small, silent creature. She had no way of knowing that by following the mysterious pull she felt within her, she would soon cross paths with the cat, and that meeting would change both their lives in ways neither of them could predict. The day grew colder, but something else began to shift in the air, as if the wind itself carried the promise of change. In the distance, Laura made a decision. Instead of following her usual path to work, she chose to wander through the city, letting her instincts guide her, without any particular destination in mind. It was as though something was waiting for her, something that required this detour. This moment of deviation from the predictable. She walked, lost in her own thoughts, the wind biting at her skin, as though the world itself was testing her resolve. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the brink of something significant. And so, as Laura walked through the city, with each step feeling like it led her closer to something she couldn't yet understand, she began her journey toward the bus stop. There, waiting in the cold, was a small, fragile creature, lost and waiting for a miracle. Little did Laura know that her decision to follow this strange, inexplicable call would be the first step toward something much bigger, a story of redemption, of healing, and of the unexpected places where hope can still be found. The day had not yet ended, but it had already started to unfold into something new, something that would forever alter the lives of both Laura and the cat who had been waiting all along. The day seemed heavy, the kind of gray winter morning where everything around her felt distant, as if the world itself was muted under a blanket of cold and gray. Laura's mind wandered, weighed down by a sense of restlessness. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling her, urging her to follow a path she hadn't considered before. It wasn't simply the exhaustion of her routine that unsettled her, it was something deeper. She had watched her friends build their lives, starting families, living their adventures, while she herself seemed stuck in a cycle of repetition. Days blurred into one another, and the vibrancy of life felt so distant. But on that day, something inside her told her that this would be different, that today, change would find her. Without understanding why, she turned onto a street she'd never taken before. Meanwhile, at the bus stop, the cat had barely moved from its corner. Its small body had grown stiff from the unrelenting cold, and an overwhelming weariness was settling into its bones. The kind of fatigue that feels like it's pulling you toward sleep. A deep, consuming sleep that might never end. Time had become an abstract concept for the cat. It no longer knew if hours or days had passed. It no longer mattered. All that remained was the instinct to wait, tethered to a faint thread of hope, though it wasn't even sure what it was waiting for. As Laura's footsteps carried her down the unfamiliar street, her senses seemed heightened, as if the city had softened around her. She felt a pull, an invisible thread tugging her closer to something, though she couldn't yet see it. The bus stop eventually came into view, and from a distance, she noticed a small shape against the drab metal and asphalt. It took her a moment to realize what it was, a cat. Curled up and unmoving, a fragile silhouette in the midst of the cold. Her heart leapt with a sudden urgency, a recognition she couldn't explain. She found herself hurrying toward the animal as if she already knew that this was where she was meant to be. When she reached the bus stop, she knelt beside the cat, its frail form barely reacting to her presence. Its eyes flickered open, half closed, and met hers with a mix of fear and resignation. But there was something more there, something deep. A silent cry for help that reverberated in the space between them. Laura's throat tightened, a lump rising with the weight of the moment. Without a second thought, she extended her hand toward the small creature. Her touch was gentle but filled with an emotion she couldn't name, compassion, tenderness, or perhaps something even deeper. The cat didn't pull away. Instead, it seemed to surrender to her, accepting the warmth of her touch as though it hadn't known such kindness in a long time. For the first time in days, its body relaxed, just a little. Without hesitation, Laura knew she couldn't leave the cat there. She carefully scooped him up, her arms cradling his fragile body. His skin was cold beneath his fur, a chilling reminder of how long he had been out there. He was so light, as though the cold had drained him of everything. Laura felt a rush of concern and worry. She needed to get him somewhere safe, somewhere he could heal. She moved quickly, shielding the cat from the cold wind as best as she could. The streets felt longer on the journey home, each step carrying both a sense of urgency and a glimmer of hope. Once inside her apartment, Laura wasted no time. She wrapped the small feline in a soft blanket, creating a warm space near the heater where he could rest. But she knew this was just the beginning of a long road ahead. The cat was weak, so weak that even the smallest movement seemed to exhaust him. She offered him warm milk, hoping he would drink, but he could barely open his mouth. Panic gripped her heart as she wondered if he would make it through the night. Desperate to help, she called the nearest veterinary clinic, her voice trembling with anxiety as she explained the situation. The receptionist on the other end of the phone was kind, but firm. This cat needed to see a vet immediately. Laura's stomach twisted with fear. But she had no other choice. She bundled the cat up once again, this time more carefully, and rushed to the clinic, her heart heavy with worry about what might happen to him. During the ride, Laura whispered words of encouragement to the cat, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. She spoke to him as if her voice could somehow give him the strength to hold on. The cat, though frail and near lifeless, seemed to understand. There was a quiet recognition in his eyes, a flicker of trust in the midst of his suffering. When they arrived at the clinic, the veterinarian wasted no time. Her face was serious, her movements swift and practiced as she examined the cat with efficiency and care. Laura watched, her heart pounding in her chest. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity, each second stretching longer than the last. The veterinarian spoke softly, but with urgency. "He's very weak," she said, "and he'll need intensive care. But there's hope. If we start treatment now, he could pull through." Laura felt a wave of relief and fear wash over her at the same time. There was hope, but the road ahead would be difficult. She nodded, determined to do whatever it took to help him. The vet explained the necessary care, outlining what needed to be done, and Laura listened closely, knowing that this was the only chance the cat had. That night, Laura refused to leave the cat's side. She stayed at the clinic, her eyes fixed on him as he lay connected to various devices, receiving fluids and medications that could, with luck, help him regain his strength. Time seemed to stand still as she watched him, every shallow breath filling her with a mixture of hope and dread. She couldn't sleep, her mind constantly turning over the situation. The night felt endless, but her commitment to this fragile life never wavered. She had no idea what the future held, but in her heart, she knew that this moment was destined to be. At dawn, the veterinarian returned to reassess the cat. Laura watched intently, looking for any sign of progress. The cat was still weak, but there was a glimmer of life in his eyes, a spark. "No matter how small, he's a fighter," the vet said, her expression softening with a slight smile. "He's responding well to the treatment. We're not out of the woods yet, but there's progress." Laura felt a wave of relief flood over her. There was still a long way to go, but this was the first sign she had been waiting for. Over the following days, with the vet's guidance, Laura learned how to care for the cat, feeding him with a syringe, offering small amounts of liquid food that he could handle. It wasn't easy, each attempt was a struggle, the cat's frail form making every effort feel like an uphill battle. But Laura was patient. She spoke to him softly, encouraging him to keep fighting, to keep going, and with each passing day, she saw small signs of progress. His eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to follow her movements. He wasn't just surviving, he was slowly, cautiously, coming back to life. The small cat, now gaining strength each day, began to show more signs of life. Laura watched closely, noticing the subtle changes in his behavior. He still wasn't completely healed, his body still weak, but there was a noticeable shift in him. When she stroked his fur, a faint, almost imperceptible purring would start, a sound so soft, so tender, that it struck a chord deep within her heart. This was the cat's silent way of expressing gratitude, and it was enough to make Laura's heart swell with emotion. It was as if the cat was finally beginning to trust her, feeling the warmth of kindness after so much time in darkness. Then one morning, as the sun streamed in through the windows, Laura woke up to a surprising sight. She had been so used to seeing the cat lying still, his fragile form curled up in his little bed. But today was different. As she approached him, she saw him standing, his small legs shaky, struggling to take his very first steps. He wobbled, clearly still weak, but there was something in his eyes, determination, a will to move forward despite the odds. Laura knelt beside him, her heart racing with emotion. She whispered soft words of encouragement, telling him he could do it, urging him to keep going. The small cat, summoning every ounce of strength, took a few unsteady steps before collapsing back into the safety of his resting place. Exhausted but triumphant, that brief moment marked a turning point, not just for the cat, but for Laura as well. It was the first sign that the cat was fighting back, that he had found the will to live. Before, he had seemed so fragile, as though he had resigned himself to the cold and the solitude. But now, there was hope. Laura realized that this small creature, whom she had rescued from the harshest of circumstances, was beginning to fight for his own survival. It was a powerful realization. As the days passed, the changes in the cat became more evident. His health improved with each passing day. Slowly, he began eating on his own, although Laura still had to help him from time to time. His body, which had once been painfully thin and frail, began to fill out, his coat growing shinier and softer with each day of care. Laura dedicated herself to him, spending every free moment tending to his needs. As she did, a deep bond began to form between them, one that was rooted in the care and compassion she had poured into him. Yet, despite his recovery, a new worry began to gnaw at Laura's thoughts. She knew that the cat had been abandoned. But why? Did he have a family somewhere, still searching for him? Or had he been discarded, left to fend for himself because he was no longer wanted? These questions haunted Laura, especially in the quiet of the evenings when the house felt empty and the weight of uncertainty seemed to echo through the silence. She couldn't ignore these doubts, they were becoming too loud in her mind, too heavy to carry. One evening, while gently petting the cat, she made a decision. She couldn't simply accept what had happened to him. She needed answers. With determination, Laura began asking her neighbors if they had seen the cat before or if they knew anything about his past. She printed out flyers, hoping to get even the smallest piece of information that might help her understand what had happened to him. Days turned into weeks, but there was no response. No one seemed to know who he was or where he had come from. Just when Laura was beginning to feel discouraged, an idea struck her. She decided to take the cat to a local animal shelter to check for a microchip. It was a long shot, but she had to try. If the cat had a family, someone who loved him, someone who might be looking for him, Laura wanted to do the right thing and reunite them. At the shelter, the staff was kind and willing to help. They immediately scanned the cat for a microchip. To Laura's surprise, the scanner beeped, indicating that a chip was present. Her heart raced as the shelter worker began to check the details in the system. She braced herself for whatever news would come next, mentally preparing for the possibility that the cat might be taken from her, returned to a family that had been looking for him all this time. But when the worker finished checking the system, her expression shifted to one of somber empathy. It turned out that the cat was registered to an elderly person who had passed away several months ago. The worker explained that there were no other contacts listed in the system. The cat had most likely been left behind when his owner had passed, abandoned in the wake of their loss. Laura's throat tightened as the weight of the revelation hit her. This cat, who had suffered so much, had lost not only his home but also his owner, his entire world. He had been left behind with no one to care for him, no one to love him. Looking down at the small feline in her arms, Laura saw something new in his eyes. There was sadness, yes, but also something else, a spark of hope. He was no longer truly alone. At that moment, Laura made a promise to him. She would never let him go back to that life of loneliness, of being forgotten. He had found a new family, and she would be the one to care for him, to give him the love and stability he deserved. With a heavy heart, but filled with a new sense of purpose, Laura took the cat home. His story, though sad, had led her to him, and now that they were together, she would make sure he would never feel abandoned again. In the days that followed, Laura named the cat Snow. It felt like the perfect name, not only because of his white fur but because he had entered her life like a snowflake, fragile, delicate, and beautiful, but with the power to change everything around him. Snow's recovery continued steadily, each day marking new milestones. He was no longer the trembling, frail creature she had found at the bus stop. He had transformed, growing stronger, more confident, and full of life. He explored the corners of Laura's apartment with newfound energy, his appetite growing with each meal. For Laura, life had changed in ways she hadn't expected. Caring for Snow had filled a void she hadn't even realized existed. The lonely nights that had once seemed endless were now accompanied by the soft sound of his purring beside her. He had become her constant companion, and in caring for him, she had found deep satisfaction. She was giving him the love and care he had been denied for so long. As Snow healed physically, Laura too began to heal in ways she hadn't anticipated. She realized that, much like Snow, she had experienced abandonment in her own life, though in different ways. The demands of work, of societal expectations, had pulled her away from who she truly was, distancing her from her own heart. But as she nurtured Snow back to health, she rediscovered the parts of herself that had been lost along the way, her compassion, her empathy, and her ability to love freely. Together, they created a new routine. Each morning, Snow would curl up beside her as she woke, and together they would start the day with a renewed sense of purpose. Laura made sure to give him his favorite food, the soft kibble he loved, and they would play together before she left for work. Even when she was away, she couldn't stop thinking about him, eager to return home and see how he was doing. Though Snow had made incredible progress, the scars of his past were still there. At times, he would act hesitant, as if still expecting to be abandoned again. Laura noticed that sometimes he would follow her around the house, watching her closely as if afraid she might disappear. These small, heartbreaking signs of insecurity strengthened Laura's resolve to show him that he was safe now, that he was home, and he would never be left behind again. To help Snow overcome his fears, Laura began introducing small adventures into their lives. She slowly took him on short outings, letting him explore new places, and each time he showed bravery, she showered him with praise and affection. These simple acts were not just about building Snow's confidence, they were also about building a future together. A future free from the fear of being abandoned. Together, they were healing, piece by piece, and Laura knew that whatever the future held, it would be brighter with Snow by her side. Snow's journey into the outside world began with careful, tender steps, guided by Laura's gentle encouragement. Unlike the harsh, unforgiving streets he had known, Laura took him to a peaceful local park. There, he could explore the vibrant smells of flowers, listen to the soft songs of birds in the trees, and feel the cool, soft grass beneath his paws. At first, Snow was hesitant, his small body still carrying the scars of his painful past. His steps were shaky, unsure, as if the outside world was both a wonder and a threat. But over time, something shifted. Slowly, Snow grew more comfortable, gaining confidence with each visit. These outings, simple as they were, became sacred moments for both of them, a quiet, unspoken understanding of the new life they were building together. As the weeks passed, another transformation took place, one that was equally as profound. Snow, once so reserved, began to show affection in small, unexpected ways. Every day, without fail, he would wait by the door for Laura to return, his eyes filled with anticipation. When she walked in, Snow would eagerly curl around her feet, a silent plea for attention, his tail flicking in joy. His gestures, though small, were full of meaning, and each one warmed Laura's heart. These were the moments that reminded her that all the struggles they had faced together, the fear, the pain, the uncertainty, had been worth it. Slowly, the wounds of the past, for both of them, began to heal. One evening, while sitting on the couch with a book in hand, Laura experienced a quiet, yet profound realization. Snow, who had once been a fragile, terrified soul, jumped onto her lap and settled there, curling up against her. His eyes, which had once held only fear and sorrow, now glimmered with trust and affection. When Laura stroked his head, a soft purring began to rise from his chest, a sound that seemed to reverberate not just through his tiny body but deep within Laura's own soul. The purr was a sound of comfort, of connection, and in that shared silence, Laura understood something she hadn't fully grasped before. Snow was not just a cat she had rescued from the streets. He was her companion, her friend, and, in many ways, her savior too. In the years before Snow's arrival, Laura had been walking through life in a haze. She hadn't realized how deep her sense of emptiness had gone, how much she longed for companionship without even knowing it. Snow had filled that gap. He had brought light into her life when she hadn't even known she was living in darkness. With him by her side, Laura began to see the world with new eyes. The things that once seemed so important, the pressures of her job, the expectations of others, no longer had the same weight. Instead, the small moments, like playing with Snow, watching him discover something new for the first time, or simply sitting together in quiet companionship, became the things that mattered most to her. She learned a crucial lesson from Snow. Love doesn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes, it's found in the most ordinary, simple moments, a loving touch, a shared glance, or the comforting presence of someone who truly cares. Those were the moments that made Laura realize just how deep her connection to Snow truly was. As time passed, Snow's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. He was no longer the fragile, frightened animal she had found on that cold, lonely bus stop. He had blossomed into a confident, loving cat. His health had improved dramatically. His once thin frame now filled out with strength. His coat, which had once been matted and dirty, now shone with vitality. Snow had become a different creature altogether, full of life, love, and confidence. And as he healed, so too did Laura. She had found a renewed sense of purpose in caring for him. A deep fulfillment she hadn't even realized she was missing. The lonely nights that once stretched endlessly before her were now filled with the soft sound of Snow's purring beside her. His warm body curled up at her feet, offering the kind of companionship that had once seemed impossible. As Snow grew stronger, Laura began to reflect more on their journey. The apartment that had once felt cold and empty now seemed full of life. Every corner held a memory. Every moment was filled with joy, laughter, and a peace that only comes from being surrounded by love. Laura thought often about how much her life had changed since the day she found Snow. She had been adrift, restless and unfulfilled, caught in a cycle of monotony. That day, when she stepped off her usual path, was the moment that set everything in motion. Snow's presence had transformed her world in ways she could never have predicted. For Snow, the past that had once defined him, his abandonment, his isolation, no longer had a hold on him. He had shed the weight of those memories and had learned to trust again. He had found not just a home with Laura, but a place where he could finally feel safe and loved, surrounded by someone who cared deeply for him. The painful memories of his past, while still a part of him, no longer shaped his future. He had found joy in his new life, joy that came from living in the moment and being fully present with the one who loved him. Looking back on everything they had overcome together, Laura realized something powerful. Snow hadn't just saved her from loneliness and emotional emptiness, he had shown her how to love again. How to care for something beyond herself. Before Snow came into her life, she hadn't realized how much she had closed herself off. She had been focused on the demands of work, societal expectations, and the busy humdrum of daily life. But through caring for Snow, she had rediscovered the parts of herself that had long been lost, her compassion, her ability to connect, her heart. Snow had filled the void in her life that she hadn't even known existed. In a way, Snow had healed her as much as she had healed him. Their bond had become a lifeline, not just for Snow, but for Laura too. They had both saved each other, and in doing so, they had found something truly beautiful, a connection that went beyond the ordinary. A love that transcended the struggles of the past. As their journey together continued, Snow and Laura forged ahead, knowing that no matter what life had in store, they would always have each other. The challenges they had faced, the uncertainty, the fear, the loneliness, had shaped them, but it was love that had guided them through. Together, they had created a new life, one built on trust, affection, and the deep certainty that they were meant to be part of each other's lives. Snow and Laura's story serves as a powerful reminder of life's unexpected twists. Sometimes, it's in the darkest of times that we find the light we've been searching for. That light can come in many forms: in the silent companionship of a cat, in the act of caring for another, or in the simple, everyday moments that remind us of what truly matters. Their journey shows us that even in our hardest times, we have the strength to rise again. And that love, the love we give, the love we receive, and the love that connects us all, has the power to heal the deepest of wounds. Snow's story is one of resilience, of finding hope even in the darkest moments. Abandoned at a bus stop, left to face the cold and a world that seemed indifferent to his suffering, he could have easily fallen into despair. Yet, in the face of abandonment, Snow was not truly abandoned by life itself. The world, though harsh and unforgiving, still held a glimmer of hope. He simply had to wait for it to reach him. Laura, too, was lost, though not in the same way. Trapped in a monotonous routine that offered little fulfillment, she had unknowingly disconnected from the joy and purpose that life could bring. Every day felt like a repetition of the last, with no real sense of direction. But in the midst of her inner restlessness, when it seemed as if the pieces of her life didn't quite fit together, Laura found something unexpected: purpose. In the quiet call to help a small, fragile creature, she reached out and found meaning once more. By opening her heart to Snow, Laura discovered a new reason to embrace life fully, to care for something beyond herself. Together, Snow and Laura show us something profoundly important: that no matter how hard life may be, or how lost we may feel, there is always the possibility to start again. There's always an opportunity to find something, or someone, that helps us remember what truly matters. In their journey, they remind us that life can be richer, more fulfilling, and more beautiful than we ever imagined. When we allow ourselves to open our hearts, to seek connection, we discover that the world is filled with possibilities, waiting for us to reach out and claim them. Laura and Snow, though they were once two lost souls, found each other at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place. Their bond was no coincidence, but a coming together of two hearts that needed one another more than they realized. They proved that a true home is not simply a place, it is a feeling. A sense of belonging that can only be found in the hearts of those we love. The love they shared became the foundation of a new life, one built on trust, compassion, and the understanding that they were no longer alone. As they moved forward together, Laura and Snow showed us that the smallest actions, the quietest moments, can have the greatest impact. A simple touch, a gentle word, a moment of kindness. These seemingly insignificant gestures are the threads that weave us together, that bind us to one another in ways that we often don't realize until much later. Snow, with his fragile form and deep vulnerability, reminded Laura of the importance of love, of compassion, and of finding the courage to care for something other than ourselves. And Laura, in turn, gave Snow a second chance at life, a life filled with warmth, safety, and the promise of a future where you would never again be left behind. This story, in all its simplicity and beauty, is a reminder that we all share the same longing for connection. Like Snow and Laura, we are all searching for love, for purpose, and for a place where we truly belong, a place we can call home. Sometimes the path to that place is difficult, full of obstacles and uncertainty. But when we open ourselves up to the possibility of change, when we seek the light even in the darkest moments, we can find our way back to what truly matters. May this story serve as an inspiration, a reminder that even when life feels overwhelming, there is always hope. That hope may come in unexpected forms, like the companionship of a small, abandoned cat or the willingness to reach out to someone in need. It is in those moments that we discover not only the strength within ourselves to move forward, but also the profound truth that love and connection are the true anchors in our lives. Together, Laura and Snow have shown us that no matter how lost we may feel, there is always a way to find our way home. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is that in the end, it's love, given, received, and shared, that leads us to where we're truly meant to be.